Chapter 1. The Out of Africa Hypothesis. When we search for the origins of humanity, when we peel back the layers of history and myth, all roads lead us to one place, this vast, sunlit continent, home to deserts, jungles, savannas, and mountains, holds within its soil the deepest roots of our shared story. It is here that our kind, Homo sapiens, first walked, first spoke, first dreamed. Let us begin, not in the present, but far, far back in time. Picture the Earth 200,000 years ago. No skyscrapers rise against the horizon. No villages dot the landscape. The world is raw, untamed, and wild. Great herds of animals roam freely. Elephants, antelope, giraffes, and creatures long vanished from memory. Predators, sleek and patient, move silently through the tall grass. And among them, small groups of humans live and struggle, their survival never guaranteed. These were our ancestors. They had no cities, no books, no machines. Yet they carried something extraordinary within them, the beginnings of imagination, of language, of community. They were not the first humans to walk the earth. Other species, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, the Neanderthals to the north, had lived before and alongside them. But Homo sapiens were different. Something about us, some spark of creativity and adaptability, set us apart. The Out of Africa hypothesis tells us that every person alive today, no matter their skin color, culture, or homeland, descends from these first Africans. This is not speculation, but a story written into the rocks and into our very cells. Fossils, scattered across the continent, bear witness to our emergence. Skulls found at Omo Kibish in Ethiopia, dating back nearly 200,000 years, reveal faces that we would recognize, rounded heads, lighter brow ridges, and features striking. At Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, bones more than 300,000 years old speak of the earliest stirrings of our species. But the bones alone are not enough. The real proof lies in our DNA. Inside each of us, hidden within every cell, is a genetic record stretching back through countless generations. By studying mitochondrial DNA type, passed down from mother to child, scientists have traced us all back to a single African woman who lived more than 150,000 years ago. She was not the first woman, not the only woman alive at her time, but she is the one whose line survived, unbroken, to the present day. She has been called Mitochondrial Eve, though in truth she represents not an individual miracle, but the endurance of a lineage. This convergence of fossil and genetic evidence paints a vivid picture. Humanity began in Africa. The continent was not merely one of many birthplaces. It was the birthplace, the wellspring from which all our stories flow. But why Africa? What was it about this land that made it the cradle of humankind? The answer lies in its diversity. Africa is a continent of contrasts. Deserts like the Sahara, rainforests like the Congo, great mountains like Kilimanjaro, fertile valleys like the Rift. Each region offered both bounty and challenge. Early humans living here had to adapt constantly to shifting climates, to scarce water, to dangerous predators. The land did not allow complacency. It demanded flexibility. In the Great Rift Valley, where tectonic forces pulled the earth apart, lakes formed and vanished, grasslands turned to deserts, and back again. Imagine a family of early humans living by a lake that slowly dries, forcing them to move. One generation learns to fish and forage along the shore. The next must master hunting across the plains. In this way, the environment became a teacher, shaping us into problem solvers, wanderers, and innovators. Fire, too, played a role. Long before city lights, the glow of fire was humanity's beacon. Here in Africa, we mastered it. At first, fire was protection, a circle of light against predators. Then it became warmth, allowing humans to endure the chill of night. But its greatest gift was cooking. With cooked food came richer nutrition, easier digestion, and more energy, fuel for growing brains. Around the fire, humans also discovered something else: community. Flames drew people together, creating the first circles of storytelling, teaching, and culture. Stone tools marked another leap. In Africa, humans shaped stone into sharp blades and points, more refined and versatile than anything before. These tools were not only weapons, but extensions of thought. With them, humans could cut, scrape, pierce, and create. The hand axe and the flake became as vital to survival as teeth and claws. And from these beginnings, technology would only grow. But the most remarkable innovation of all may have been symbolic thought. Evidence from sites like Blombo's Cave in South Africa reveals early humans carving symbols into ochre, painting with natural pigments, and perhaps even crafting ornaments. These small acts of creativity whisper of minds that could imagine, represent, and dream. The beginnings of art, of culture, of identity, all took root here. So Africa was more than a cradle. It was a forge. Its shifting landscapes, its challenges and abundance, honed humanity into something unique, a species capable of surviving not just in one place but in many. And it was this versatility, this adaptability, that would one day carry humans far beyond the continent of their birth. Yet the push to leave Africa was not immediate. For tens of thousands of years, humans thrived within its borders, living in small, scattered groups. They followed rivers, hunted antelope across grasslands, gathered roots and berries, and sheltered in caves. Their numbers were few, their lives precarious. But slowly populations grew. As groups expanded, they pressed against the edges of their territories. The land could not always provide for all. Competition for food, for water, for shelter became fierce. And then there was the climate. Earth's cycles of ice and warmth reshaped Africa again and again. Periods of drought turned grasslands into deserts, driving humans to search for greener lands. Rainy eras transformed the Sahara into a fertile expanse of lakes and rivers, opening pathways for migration. These rhythms of scarcity and abundance acted like a pulse, urging humans to move, to explore, to risk. It is here, in this delicate balance between survival and possibility, that the seeds of migration were sown. Humans had become restless wanderers, not by choice alone, but by necessity. The same adaptability that had allowed them to endure Africa's shifting landscapes would soon carry them into lands unknown. Before we follow them outward, let us linger one last time on the image of early humanity in Africa. Small bands of men, women, and children moving together across open plains. Their footprints press into damp earth, sometimes left behind for us to find tens of thousands of years later. They carry tools of stone, skins for warmth, baskets woven from reeds. They walk not aimlessly, but with a quiet determination. For within them is the unspoken drive that defines our species, the urge to seek, to discover, to move forward. Africa gave us birth. Africa shaped us. Africa prepared us. And when the time was right, Africa let us go. Africa, the cradle of us all. As we walk further into the deep past, let us pause and reflect on what Africa truly was for our species. Not just a place of birth, but a vast classroom. One that tested, shaped, and prepared us for every challenge we would one day face. The land itself was a paradox. It could be harsh yet generous. It could give life in abundance, and just as swiftly take it away. To live here meant to live with change, and to live with change meant to adapt. That is the heart of the human story. Imagine the Sahara Desert, not as we know it today, endless sand and sun, but as it once was, shifting like a living thing. At times it was green, rich with rivers and grasslands, teeming with fish, hippos, and antelope. At other times it was barren, stretching dry and desolate for thousands of miles. Our ancestors lived through both realities. They fished in the Sahara's ancient lakes, hunted by its rivers, and later, when the rains failed, they crossed its sands in search of more forgiving lands. The Sahara was not a boundary, it was a gateway, opening and closing with the rhythm of the earth. Farther east, the great Rift Valley stood as another proving ground. Here, shifting tectonic plates cracked the earth apart, creating cliffs, valleys, and fertile basins. Volcanic activity shaped the landscape, leaving behind layers of ash that, by a strange twist of fate, preserved the footprints of our earliest kin. To this day, at Laetoli in Tanzania, the prints of beings who walked upright nearly 4 million years ago still lie etched in stone, silent reminders that walking on 2 legs was one of our first great journeys. By the time Homo sapiens emerged, the Rift Valley was already a corridor of life and change. Lakes would swell and vanish, forests would advance and retreat. Families who lived there had no choice but to move with the seasons, to track the herds, to discover new waterholes. In this constant dance of movement, survival meant more than strength. It meant memory, cooperation, and foresight. To live here was to think ahead. But Africa's challenges were not only natural, they were also social. Humans, like many animals, lived in groups. A single individual, alone on the savannah, could not hope to survive long against predators, hunger, or exposure. But together, in bands of 20, 30, or more, humans found safety. They could share food, protect children, and combine knowledge. Around the campfire, under a canopy of stars, they could plan the next day's hunt or retell the lessons of past generations. These gatherings were more than survival strategies. They were the beginnings of culture. Here, in the glow of firelight, humans learned to speak. Not just to call out warnings or commands, but to tell stories, to sing, to pass knowledge across time. Language became the invisible thread binding the group together, allowing ideas to stretch beyond the present moment. This was one of our greatest tools, one no predator could match, no landscape could erase. And it was here, too, that humans began to imagine. At sites like Blombos Cave, on the southern coast of Africa, archaeologists have found pieces of ochre etched with deliberate designs, cross-hatches, lines, symbols. They found shell beads stained with red pigment, perhaps strung as necklaces or sewn into clothing. These were not necessities of survival. They were expressions, marks of identity, of belonging, of self. In these artifacts we glimpse the first sparks of creativity, of art, of spirit. Africa gave us everything: the food we ate, the tools we made, the fire that warmed us, the stories we told, and the imagination that lifted us beyond mere survival. And yet, Africa also pressed us with limits. Populations grew. Climates shifted. Resources thinned. And with each challenge came a choice: stay and struggle, or move and discover. Scientists once debated whether this movement outward from Africa happened at all. For decades, two competing theories shaped our understanding of human origins. One was the multi-regional hypothesis, the idea that humans evolved separately in different parts of the world. In Africa, in Asia, in Europe, each population slowly transforming into modern humans, while still exchanging genes with one another. The other was the out-of-Africa hypothesis, the idea that modern humans evolved once in Africa and from there spread to every corner of the earth, replacing or absorbing other human species. For a time, the debate was fierce. Fossil discoveries hinted one way, then another. But as the science of genetics matured, the truth became clearer. Our DNA tells a simple, unified story. We are all Africans beneath the skin. Every one of us descends from populations that once lived within Africa's borders. The genetic evidence is overwhelming. Our diversity today is but a branch of the richness that still exists within Africa itself. If you compare the genomes of people from around the world, you find something astonishing. Two individuals from the same African village can be more genetically different from one another than either is from a European, an Asian, or an indigenous American. This is because Africa has been humanity's home the longest, allowing genetic diversity to accumulate there over vast spans of time. When small groups left Africa, they carried only a portion of this diversity with them, a handful of seeds scattered on the wind. In this way, Africa is not just our origin point. It remains our richest wellspring, the place where the depth of humanity's variation and resilience is still most clearly seen. Now, imagine once more those first groups of Homo sapiens. Picture them not as abstractions, but as real people. A mother cradling her child beneath the stars. A group of hunters napping stone tools beside a river. Children laughing as they chase one another across the grass. Their lives were hard, yes, but also filled with moments of joy, of wonder, of connection. They were not so different from us. The same blood flowed in their veins. The same curiosity shone in their eyes. For tens of thousands of years, they lived and died on African soil. They buried their dead, they sang their songs, they painted their caves. But slowly pressure mounted. The land could not hold them all. And so, like water spilling over a vessel, they began to move outward. First a few, then many. Step by step, generation by generation, they followed coastlines, rivers, and valleys, until they stood at the very edges of the known world. It is from this moment, this delicate tipping point between staying and leaving, that the next great chapter begins. The moment when Africa, having raised and shaped us, released us into the wider world. But before we cross that threshold, before we follow our ancestors into the Arabian Peninsula, let us linger here one last time in the heart of Africa. Let us listen to the rustle of wind through the acacia trees. Let us feel the heat of the sun on the savanna. Let us hear the distant calls of animals, the murmur of a family gathered around a fire. For this was the soundscape of our birth, the rhythm of our earliest days. Africa is where the human journey began, and in its soil, its rivers, its valleys, our story still whispers, waiting for us to listen. Traces in stone and bone, the earth remembers us. Even when we are gone, even when tens of thousands of years have passed, the land keeps small fragments of our story, a tooth in the soil, a skull beneath the sand, an imprint of a footprint hardened into stone. It is through these fragments that we piece together the truth of our beginnings. In the highlands of Ethiopia, in a place called Omo Kabish, archaeologists uncovered the remains of some of the earliest Homo sapiens. Their bones, more than 190,000 years old, speak with quiet certainty. By this time our species already walked the earth. Their skulls, with rounded crania and delicate features, look strikingly familiar. They are us, separated only by time. Far to the west, in the dry hills of Morocco, at Jebel Irhoud, other bones whisper an even older story, nearly 300,000 years in the past. Here, too, are the marks of our kind. These people lived long before writing, long before farming, long before civilization, and yet in their faces we see the echoes of our own. Each fossil is a page in a scattered book, fragile and incomplete. Some are found whole, most are found broken, but together they form a mosaic. A hand here, a jaw there, a child's tooth tucked away in the earth. Each discovery closes gaps while new ones open. The story is never finished, only deepened. But fossils alone do not tell us everything. For a fuller story, we turn inward to our own bodies. Inside every cell lies a history book written in DNA. And DNA does not lie. It speaks of connections, of migrations, of origins. It shows us that every human being alive today shares a common ancestry in Africa. Consider mitochondrial DNA passed from mothers to children. When scientists studied it, they found that all human lines trace back to a single woman who lived in Africa around 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. She was not the first woman, nor the only woman alive at her time, but her lineage endured while others did not. She became our shared ancestor, the mother of us all. Other genetic markers tell similar stories. The Y chromosome, passed from father to son, reveals lineages that converge back to African ancestors. The patterns of variation in our DNA are richest in Africa, thinning out as populations spread outward. It is as though Africa is a great river branching into streams that flow across the world. This convergence of fossil and genetic evidence leaves little doubt. We are one family with one birthplace. The boundaries we draw today, borders, nations, races, are all recent inventions. Beneath them lies a deeper truth. We are Africans, every one of us, shaped by the continent that first gave us life. The push to wander. And yet, for all its richness, Africa could not hold us forever. The same forces that shaped us, climate, scarcity, curiosity, eventually set us in motion. For tens of thousands of years, Africa's environment shifted like a great pendulum. Ice ages in the north brought drought to the south. Rains returned and deserts bloomed green. Rivers carved new paths. Lakes swelled and vanished. With every swing, human communities had to adapt. Imagine a family living near a fertile river. For generations they fish its waters, gather reeds along its banks, hunt game in the surrounding grasslands. Then slowly the rains falter, the river shrinks, the fish grow scarce, the land grows dry and cracked. What choice is left but to move? To follow the animals, to search for new water, to seek what the land can no longer provide? This was not a single decision, but countless decisions made by countless families across thousands of years. Each move small, each step incremental. But together, these steps carried humanity farther and farther, until the horizon itself seemed to call. There was also another force, less tangible, but just as powerful: curiosity. The human mind does not rest easily. Even when food is plentiful, even when shelter is secure, there is always a question: what lies beyond? What is over the next hill, across the next river, at the far edge of the horizon? This restless spirit, born in Africa, would one day carry us to the frozen tundra of Siberia, the deserts of Australia, the forests of the Amazon. But it began here, with small groups who looked outward and dared to take the first steps into the unknown. As populations grew, as territories filled, as climates shifted, Africa became both cradle and crossroads. Some would remain, thriving in its many environments. Others would begin the long journey outward. They could not have known what awaited them: new lands, strange animals, unfamiliar skies. They could not have imagined that their descendants would one day fill the earth, speaking thousands of languages, building great cities, gazing at the stars. They only knew that survival meant moving, and moving meant living. And so, slowly, humanity gathered itself for the first great migration. Africa has given us birth, shaped our minds, forged our tools, and instilled within us the unyielding drive to adapt and to wander. The earth has prepared us. The climate has pushed us. Our curiosity has urged us. And now, at the edge of Africa, our ancestors stand ready to take the first steps into a wider world. Beyond the Red Sea, across the Arabian Peninsula, a new chapter awaits. The first waves across the Arabian Peninsula. The story of humanity's outward journey begins not with sudden leaps, but with cautious steps. For thousands of years, Africa was home. It was all our ancestors had ever known: the cradle, the training ground, the familiar land beneath their feet. And yet, slowly, inevitably, the horizon beckoned. When we imagine migration, we often think of great masses moving together. But in truth, it was not so. Humanity's first journeys beyond Africa were quiet, gradual, almost invisible. Small groups of families, mothers carrying children, elders leaning on staffs, hunters and gatherers walking side by side, moved a little farther than before. They followed rivers to their ends, coastlines to their curves, animal tracks to the edge of the land. It is here, at Africa's northeastern border, that the first crossings took place. The narrow channel we now call the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, between modern Djibouti and Yemen, was the threshold. Today it spans nearly 30 kilometers, but in the deep past, during ice ages when sea levels dropped, it narrowed to a shorter, more passable distance. Sometimes land bridges and exposed islands offered stepping stones across. Imagine standing there, on the African shore, tens of thousands of years ago. The air is heavy with salt, the sea before you vast and restless. On the far side, a hazy outline of land rises against the horizon. To cross seems impossible, dangerous, and yet curiosity stirs. Perhaps the tide is low, revealing shallows. Perhaps driftwood or simple rafts offer a way. Perhaps one day someone simply dares, and in that daring the first great step is taken. This crossing, though small in distance, was monumental in meaning. It was humanity's first true step out of Africa. Those who made it entered a new world, the Arabian Peninsula. The land they found there was not easy. Much like Africa, Arabia was shaped by shifting climates. Sometimes lush with rivers and grasslands, sometimes dry and unforgiving, it demanded resilience. But humans carried Africa within them. The tools, the fire, the knowledge, and above all, the adaptability to survive. The earliest migrants likely followed what we now call the southern route, hugging the coasts, moving slowly along shorelines rich in food. The sea offered shellfish, crabs, and fish. The tidal pools gave easy meals to those who knew how to gather. This was a new kind of survival, not only hunting across open plains, but learning to read the rhythms of the ocean, the pull of tides, the hidden bounty of the shore. Archaeological clues support this. In caves and coastal sites across Arabia and South Asia, stone tools resembling those from Africa appear, microliths, blades, and flakes that hint at the movements of early humans. Some of these sites are now submerged beneath the sea, lost when waters rose after the last ice age. Beneath those waves may still lie footprints, hearths, and villages, waiting to be discovered. It is humbling to imagine. Entire chapters of our story lie drowned beneath oceans, unseen yet vital. The first journeys along these coasts may be hidden there, silent, but no less real. The people who walked this route were not conquerors or colonists. They were families, wanderers, seekers. Their movements were slow, measured not in days or months, but in generations. A group might settle by a river for decades, raising children, growing old, and dying there. Only later would their descendants move farther, following the coast to new shores. Migration was not a march, it was a drifting tide of humanity, patient and persistent. And what of the inner deserts of Arabia? At times these lands were barriers. The Arabian interior could be harsh, dry, and deadly. But during wetter periods, when monsoons shifted and rains fell, the peninsula bloomed. Rivers carved valleys, lakes filled basins, grasslands spread. In these times, humans moved not only along the coasts, but inward, exploring, adapting, surviving. Even here, they carried Africa with them, not only in blood and bone, but in memory. The skills honed on the savannas, tool-making, cooperation, endurance, were the very skills that allowed them to endure Arabia's challenges. Each step outward was a continuation of what Africa had already begun. These first migrants may not have known the scale of what they were doing. They were not setting out to colonize the world. They were simply living, surviving, following the land and its rhythms. Yet in their quiet persistence they lit a fuse that would burn across the continents. And so the story unfolds, from Africa into Arabia, from familiar lands into the unknown. The Red Sea was crossed, the coasts were followed, the deserts endured. Humanity's journey outward had begun. But this was only the first wave. Many more would follow across millennia, each shaped by climate, by chance, by need. Together they would weave the vast tapestry of human dispersal, carrying us to every corner of the earth. Life along the shores, To understand the first waves of migration beyond Africa, we must imagine life along the ancient coastlines, places that no longer exist as they once did. The world then was colder. Vast sheets of ice locked away water, and the seas were lower. Land stretched farther out, exposing wide beaches, tidal flats, and shallow lagoons that are now buried beneath the waves. These shorelines were humanity's highways, carrying our ancestors along the edge of continents, step by careful step. The ocean, to early humans, was both mystery and promise. It was a shifting, unpredictable force, sometimes calm and generous, sometimes violent and dangerous, but it offered something precious, food that replenished itself daily, predictably, without long hunts or dangerous chases. Shellfish clung to rocks. Crabs scuttled in tidal pools. Fish gathered in shallow waters, their silvery bodies flashing in the sun. For a people used to the uncertainties of hunting on land, the ocean must have seemed a steady companion. Even the simplest tools, sharp stones, woven baskets, sharpened sticks, could turn a tide pool into a feast. Women and children likely became experts at gathering along the shores, while men hunted inland or fished from rocks. Food was shared. Fire roasted shellfish until they cracked, and smoke carried the scent of salt and flame into the night. Imagine such a scene. A family gathered on the sand at dusk, the waves lapping against the shore. Children chase one another, their laughter carried on the wind. Adults kneel by the fire, prying open shells, their hands darkened by soot and ash. In the distance, a crescent moon rises, its pale glow mirrored on the restless water. No one speaks of migration, no one speaks of leaving Africa behind. For them, this is simply life, moving where food is found, resting where the land allows, always one step ahead of scarcity. Archaeological evidence suggests that this coastal adaptation was crucial. The ability to live from the sea provided humans with a reliable food source that allowed steady expansion. Unlike hunting large game, which required cooperation, luck, and sometimes dangerous effort, the sea offered small but dependable harvests. And when the land grew dry, when animals migrated elsewhere, the ocean remained. But these coasts were not only places of survival. They were also corridors of exploration. Walking along a beach is easier than cutting through dense forests or climbing steep mountains. The smooth sweep of sand, the predictable line of the water's edge, invited travel. Step by step, family by family, humans moved along these paths, sometimes staying for generations, sometimes pressing onward. The southern route out of Africa, across the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and into Arabia, may have carried people all the way to the coasts of India and eventually to Southeast Asia. Though the evidence is scattered, stone tools found along these routes bear striking resemblance to African styles. They are like signatures left in stone, proof that those who once shaped tools by African rivers also walked the shores of Arabia and beyond. Many of these early settlements now lie hidden. As ice sheets melted and seas rose, the coastlines of the past disappeared beneath the waves. Entire landscapes were swallowed. Beaches where children once played, caves where fires once burned, trails where footprints once pressed into wet sand. The ocean that once sustained life also became a vault, keeping those early chapters sealed from view. Occasionally, divers or dredging projects uncover a clue, a stone tool, a fragment of bone, but so much remains unseen, preserved in silence beneath the sea. And yet, even in this silence, we can imagine the first voyagers standing at the edge of the Red Sea, watching tides and currents, experimenting with simple rafts of wood or reed. Perhaps they lashed driftwood together with vines, or floated on inflated skins. Perhaps some crossings failed, lives lost to the waves. But others succeeded, and with each success, courage grew. With each crossing, the world widened. The Arabian Peninsula they entered was no paradise. Much of it was arid, wind-swept, and barren. But during certain periods the land was softened by rains. Rivers carved through valleys, lakes shimmered in basins, grasslands spread across regions that are now desert. Fossils of hippos, crocodiles, and elephants found in Arabia tell us that, long ago, it was a land where water flowed freely and animals thrived. In such times humans found paths inward, not just along the coasts. They followed rivers, drank from lakes, and hunted across green plains that today are nothing but sand. Life here was not easy. The sun was harsh, water scarce, predators dangerous. But humanity was ready. Africa had taught us to endure extremes. The fire kept us warm. Tools cut hides and shaped shelters. Social bonds ensured that food was shared, that children were protected, that no one was left behind. The Arabian Peninsula became not a dead end, but a testing ground, a place where human resilience proved itself again and again. One can imagine a small camp in a sheltered valley, the remains of a fire smoldering in the early dawn. Smoke rises into the clear sky, the air already warming under the sun. A hunter returns with a gazelle, its body carried over his shoulders. Children run to greet him, their hands reaching eagerly. The gazelle will be shared. Roasted meat for the adults, broth for the children, sinew for tools, hide for shelter. Nothing wasted. Everything used. This was the rhythm of life, repeated countless times in countless places as humanity edged farther into the unknown. These were not great leaps, but gradual steps. And yet, looking back, we see how extraordinary they were. A species born on the savannas of Africa now stood on new ground, looked out on new horizons, breathed in new air. The Red Sea was behind them. Ahead lay the vastness of Asia. They could not have known it, but this was the beginning of something immense. The first footsteps into Arabia were the opening notes of a symphony that would carry humanity to every continent on earth. And so, along the shores of the Arabian Peninsula, among tidal pools and shifting dunes, the first waves of humanity began their long and quiet journey outward. The shifting lands. The Arabian Peninsula was never one thing. It was a land of change, shaped by cycles of wet and dry, by rhythms of climate that stretched across thousands of years. To imagine it only as the barren desert we know today is to miss its deeper story. For in the distant past, Arabia could be lush and green, alive with rivers, lakes, and grasslands. Then, slowly, inevitably, the rains would fail, the land would dry, and the desert would return. It was in these cycles that humanity's fate was bound. During the green phases, when monsoon rains shifted northward, Arabia bloomed. Rivers carved winding paths across the land, watering valleys where trees and grasses flourished. Lakes filled basins, drawing herds of animals, gazelle, oryx, even elephants and hippos. For humans, these were times of abundance. Camps could be made by the water's edge. Food was plentiful. Children thrived. Life, for a while, was easier. But nothing lasted. Slowly, imperceptibly, the rains faltered. Lakes shrank, rivers dwindled to trickles. Grass withered. The animals moved on, and with them, the people. The same valleys that once rang with laughter and firelight fell silent, abandoned to sand and wind. This was the rhythm of Arabia, a land that gave, then withdrew. And our ancestors learned to live with it. They became wanderers of cycles, moving with the rains, adjusting to the land's moods. Where water pooled, they settled. Where dryness spread, they left. In this way, Arabia itself became a teacher, one that demanded flexibility, resilience, and foresight. We might imagine a family living by a great lake, its waters glimmering in the sun. Fishermen cast simple lines from reed rafts. Children splash in the shallows, their footprints pressed into wet sand. Nearby, hunters stalk gazelle in the tall grass. The air is filled with bird calls and the scent of green things growing. It feels like paradise. And yet, slowly, the waterline sinks. Day by day, season by season, the lake grows smaller. Elders notice it first. The fish are fewer. The grass is dry. The people begin to prepare. They will move again, as they always have. For in Arabia, nothing stands still. These shifts may sound harsh, but they shaped humanity in profound ways. To survive here was to anticipate change, to sense patterns in nature, to prepare for what was coming. This ability, to read the signs, to imagine the future, to plan for scarcity, was one of humanity's greatest strengths. It set us apart, gave us the tools not only to endure, but to spread across the world. And spread we did. For while Arabia could be harsh, it was also a gateway. Beyond its coasts and deserts lay Asia, vast, varied, filled with opportunity. Recent discoveries suggest that our ancestors may have reached farther and faster than once believed. For decades, scholars thought humans left Africa only around 60,000 years ago. But evidence now hints at earlier journeys, perhaps 100,000 years ago or more. Fossil remains in Israel, tools in India, and genetic signals in living populations all whisper the same truth. The first waves may have carried us across Asia sooner than anyone expected. Think of the implications. Small groups leaving Africa, crossing into Arabia, following coasts and rivers, and within a few thousand years reaching India, perhaps even Southeast Asia. A journey not of conquest, but of persistence. Step by step, fire by fire, generation by generation, humanity moved outward. And yet it was not a straight path. Many early journeys may have ended in failure. Populations stranded by drought. Camps swallowed by desert. Families lost to hunger or thirst. Whole lineages extinguished, leaving only faint traces in stone tools or fossil bones. The journey outward was not one unbroken march, but a series of attempts, retreats, and renewals. Waves of people came and went, some leaving no descendants, others seeding entire continents. Still, the pace of expansion is astonishing. To walk from the Red Sea to the shores of India may seem unimaginable today. But for people who lived on foot, whose lives were measured in seasons and migrations, it was a natural extension of their way of life. They did not set out for India. They simply followed the coast, the rivers, the game, always a little farther than before. In this way, they advanced not as travelers on a map, but as families in search of tomorrow. It is worth pausing here to reflect. When we think of history, we often think of kings and empires, of battles and monuments. But this chapter of our story has none of that. No walls, no cities, no names carved in stone. Instead, it is written in movement, in footsteps across sand and fires left smoldering on a beach, in shells discarded in a cave. It is a history without words, carried in blood and bone and the quiet persistence of survival. And yet, in its silence, it speaks volumes. It tells us that humanity was never meant to stand still, that even in the earliest days, when our numbers were small and our tools simple, we were restless. The horizon always called. The unknown was not something to fear, but something to step into. Again and again in Arabia and beyond, our ancestors proved that to be human is to move, to adapt, to endure. And so, through shifting climates and uncertain paths, the first waves pressed on. Arabia was crossed, its lessons learned. The coasts became highways, the deserts teachers, the rains both friend and foe. And beyond Arabia, Asia waited, vast, mysterious, full of promise. The journey was far from over. In fact, it was only beginning. Toward distant shores, from the deserts and coasts of Arabia, the path widened. Beyond lay South Asia, a land of monsoons, rivers, forests, and fertile shores. To step into this region was to enter a world unlike any the first migrants had ever seen. The coastline that stretched eastward from Arabia was a ribbon of possibility. Families moving along it would have encountered new landscapes with each season, mangroves rich with shellfish, river deltas teeming with fish, forests alive with birdsong. Here the air grew heavier, the rains more generous. The land itself seemed to breathe differently, offering food and water in rhythms far removed from the dry pulse of Arabia. Archaeologists trace these movements through stone. In caves and open sites across India, tools appear that echo those left behind in Africa. They are like fingerprints, blades and flakes shaped in familiar patterns, telling us that the same minds, the same traditions, were carried across deserts and seas. They tell us that humans stood here by Indian rivers tens of thousands of years ago, carrying Africa within them. But the evidence is not only in tools. It is also in our very genes. Modern studies of human DNA suggest that nearly all non-African people alive today trace their ancestry to these first waves, small groups that left Africa, crossed into Arabia, and journeyed east. From them came the staggering diversity of humanity beyond Africa, branching into countless cultures and lineages. To imagine this journey, let us walk with them. Picture a band of travelers following a river down to the sea. The air is thick and warm, alive with the hum of insects. The river widens into a delta, its waters rich with fish. Children wade in the shallows, chasing darting minnows with their hands. Adults gather reeds to weave into mats and baskets. Fires crackle, smoke rising into the humid air. Night falls, and the people sit in a circle. Some tell stories, gestures filling the silence of a language not yet written. Others stare at the horizon where the dark sea stretches into mystery. Beyond that horizon lies more land, though they do not know it. Yet something in them, the same force that carried them out of Africa, keeps them moving forward. Step by step, season by season, they press onward. Some stay behind, finding fertile valleys where they settle for generations. Others move on, drawn by the endless edge of the sea. By following this ribbon of coastline, humanity spread astonishingly far, astonishingly fast. Within what may have been only a few thousand years, the descendants of those who crossed the Red Sea were standing on the shores of Southeast Asia, gazing at distant islands. This speed surprises us, for we imagine migration as slow. But for people who lived on foot, who knew only the rhythm of moving where food and water led, this was natural. They did not measure distance as we do. 100 kilometers was not a barrier, but a lifetime's path divided among generations. The journey was not a march, but a drifting tide of humanity, carried by necessity, curiosity, and chance. And what of those who looked across waters toward unseen lands? Perhaps they lashed logs into rafts, or floated on bundles of reeds. Perhaps they watched the flight of birds to guess where land might lie. With each experiment, courage grew. With each crossing, the world widened. Already, in these early ages, humans were becoming seafarers, testing themselves against the sea. The archaeological record reminds us how much is lost. Many of the camps, hearths, and pathways of these early migrants now lie drowned beneath oceans that rose after the last ice age. Entire coastlines vanished, leaving us with only fragments, a shell bead, a hearthstone, a scatter of tools. Yet even in fragments, the story shines through. It tells us that humans pressed eastward with persistence, never stopping, never satisfied with what lay behind. By the time they reached South Asia, humanity had proven something profound. We were no longer bound to one land, one climate, or one way of life. We had crossed seas, endured deserts, adapted to monsoons and forests. In every place, we found a way to survive. This was not chance. It was the essence of being human, resilience, creativity, and the unyielding drive to explore. Let us pause here at the edge of the Bay of Bengal. Behind us lies Africa, the cradle, and Arabia, the gateway. Ahead lies a vast world, Southeast Asia, Australia, and beyond. The first great wave of migration has carried us far, farther than we might have believed possible. And still the horizon calls. For this is only the beginning. The next chapters of our story will take us into continents unknown, across seas and mountains, through forests and ice. We will stand on new lands, face new challenges, and create new cultures. The footsteps that began at the Red Sea will soon circle the earth itself. And so, from Africa to Arabia, from Arabia to India, the tide of humanity flows onward. Silent, persistent, unstoppable. The first waves have become a flood, shaping the destiny of our species. Conquering continents, Asia, Australia, and Europe. The first waves of migration carried humanity along the coasts of Arabia and India. But the journey did not stop there. From these beginnings, our species spread farther into vast continents and unfamiliar lands. Asia, Australia, and Europe would each present new challenges, new climates, and new opportunities, shaping humanity in ways that echo even now. Asia, the great expanse. Asia was immense, the largest continent, filled with extremes. Here, humans encountered deserts broader than Arabia, forests denser than any seen before, rivers wider and more powerful than the Nile. It was a continent of staggering variety, where survival demanded endless adaptability. In South Asia, humans thrived in monsoon-fed valleys, learning the rhythms of rains and floods. In Central Asia, they crossed open steppes where herds of great animals roamed. In East Asia, they entered lands of bamboo, wild rice, and thick forests alive with new species. Each environment was a puzzle, and humans found solutions. The tools evolved. From simple flakes and scrapers, people began to shape blades, points, and hafted tools that could be fixed to wooden shafts. Fire was mastered more deeply, used not only for warmth and cooking, but for shaping landscapes, burning forests to clear pathways or flush out. And in Asia, humans met rivals. The Denisovans in the east, the last of the Homo erectus in Southeast Asia. Some encounters may have been hostile, others peaceful. We know from DNA that there was mixing unions that left a legacy still present in modern populations. In this way, Asia was not only a land to conquer, but a place where humanity itself was reshaped. Australia, the leap across water. Perhaps the most extraordinary achievement of early humans was the crossing to Australia. To reach it, people had to cross open seas, a challenge far greater than walking along coasts. Even at the lowest sea levels, stretches of open water separated the islands of Southeast Asia from the continent we now call Australia. And yet, by at least 65,000 years ago, humans had done it. They had sailed or rafted across channels, navigating by stars, currents, and instinct. This was no accident. It required planning, cooperation, and imagination. A raft had to be built, food prepared, groups organized. People had to believe that land lay beyond the horizon, though they could not see it. Arriving in Australia, they found a land unlike any other. Giant marsupials roamed, creatures unlike the mammals of Africa or Asia. Megafauna such as the diprotodon, a massive wombat-like animal, and the marsupial lion prowled the land. For humans, this was a new frontier, demanding new strategies of hunting, gathering, and survival. Here, too, culture blossomed. Evidence of some of the world's oldest rock art survives in Australia, suggesting that the people who arrived there carried not only tools and fire, but stories, symbols, and imagination. The leap to Australia was not just physical, it was cultural, a step into new ways of seeing the world. Europe, into the cold. While some moved east, others turned north and west, entering Europe. This was a land defined by cold, shaped by the ice ages. Glaciers pressed down, winters stretched long, and survival here demanded new kinds of resilience. Humans arriving in Europe met the Neanderthals, powerful, intelligent hominins who had thrived there for hundreds of thousands of years. Encounters between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were complex. There was competition, perhaps conflict, but there was also exchange. We know that interbreeding occurred, leaving traces in our DNA. We also suspect that knowledge may have been shared, techniques for hunting large animals, methods for surviving harsh winters. Over time, modern humans spread across the continent. They brought with them innovations that defined a new era. Tools became more sophisticated. Finely crafted blades, bone needles, carved figurines. Cave art blossomed with animals painted in ochre and charcoal, flickering in firelight. These were not merely marks, but symbols, evidence of imagination, of culture, of the beginnings of what we might call spirit. Europe tested humanity in fire and ice, but it also revealed the full flowering of our creativity. The people who survived here were not only hunters, but artists, storytellers, dreamers. The meaning of these journeys, Asia, Australia, and Europe, each pushed humanity in different ways. Asia expanded our adaptability, forcing us to master climates from tropics to tundra. Australia tested our ability to cross seas, to innovate and plan for journeys beyond sight. Europe challenged us with cold and darkness, calling forth culture, art, and perhaps the beginnings of spirituality. These journeys were not merely about survival. They were about becoming human. Step by step, across continents and seas, we carried not only our bodies, but our minds, our stories, our sense of wonder. Each new land demanded something different, and in meeting those demands, we became more than wanderers. We became explorers, creators, thinkers. The migrations into Asia, Australia, and Europe were not the end of the story, far from it. Beyond them lay another frontier, one that seemed impossible. The vast, unbroken oceans and the distant lands of the Americas. But before humanity could cross into that new world, it had to endure ice and time, waiting for the moment when the path would open. And so, as the ice age deepened, as glaciers locked away oceans and land bridges formed, the stage was set for the next great chapter in humanity, the Great Leap, populating the Americas. The story of humanity's migrations had already carried us across Africa, and to Arabia, through Asia, and even across the seas to Australia. But one frontier remained, the vast lands of the Americas. To reach them was to cross a boundary unlike any before. The Americas had been isolated for millions of years, their ecosystems evolving in near solitude. For humans, entering this new world was nothing short of extraordinary, a leap into the unknown, across ice and ocean into lands untouched by our kind. The Beringia Bridge. For much of the Ice Age, immense glaciers locked away water, lowering sea levels around the world. In that time, a land bridge emerged between Siberia and Alaska, a broad plain we now call Beringia. It was not a narrow path, but a vast expanse of tundra and steppe, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Mammoths, bison, and horses grazed there, making it a rich environment for hunters. It is here, most scholars believe, that humans first crossed into the Americas. They were not armies, but small groups of families following herds, carrying tools, fire, and memory. To them, this was simply another journey, another horizon. Yet in truth, they were stepping into a world no human had ever seen. For decades, the story was simple. Around 13,000 years ago, humans crossed Beringia and moved south through an ice-free corridor between glaciers, spreading across North and South America. These first people were called the Clovis culture, named for their distinct fluted spear points found across the continent. They were long seen as the first Americans. But the story is changing. Earlier arrivals. New discoveries suggest that humans may have reached the Americas far earlier. At White Sands in New Mexico, ancient footprints preserved in soft earth suggest human presence over 20,000 years ago. In Brazil's Pedra Furada caves, stone tools hint at occupation even earlier. Each finding pushes the timeline back, suggesting that humanity may have reached the Americas long before the Clovis culture flourished. Some theories propose coastal migration, that humans followed the Pacific shoreline, traveling in boats or walking along beaches, living from the sea as their ancestors had done across Arabia and Asia. In this version of the story, They may have slipped southward long before the ice corridors opened, settling quietly along coasts now drowned by rising seas. If true, it means the peopling of the Americas was not a single leap, but a series of waves, some successful, some fading, all leaving faint traces in bones, tools, and DNA tatra. The spread across a new world. Once in the Americas, humanity moved with astonishing speed. From Alaska to Patagonia is over 13,000 kilometers, and yet, within only a few thousand years, humans had spread across the entire hemisphere. This was not conquest in the modern sense. It was survival, the slow tide of families following rivers, forests, and game. The Americas offered every kind of environment. Icy tundra in the north, vast grasslands in the center, mountains stretching like spines down the west, rainforests alive with endless life, deserts glowing under the sun. In each place, humans adapted. They hunted mammoths and mastodons with spears tipped in stone. They gathered wild plants, berries, and roots. They fished rivers and lakes. And with each adaptation, culture grew. Tools diversified. Camps became villages. Stories were shared around fires, echoing beneath stars that were the same, yet seen from new skies. The speed of this spread tells us something profound about humanity. By now, we were no longer tentative wanderers. We were masters of movement, skilled at reading landscapes, predicting seasons, and finding ways to endure. The Americas were vast, but no longer impenetrable. Within a few thousand years, they were home. The megafauna and the extinctions. The first Americans also encountered creatures unlike any in Africa, Asia, or Europe. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, towering camels, and massive beavers filled the land. It was a world of giants shaped by millions of years of isolation. But within a short span of humanity's arrival, many of these animals vanished. Whether from hunting pressure, climate change, or both, the great megafauna disappeared, leaving silence where once there had been thunder. For humans, this was both loss and opportunity, a reshaping of the environment that demanded new strategies, but also cleared paths for expansion. The story of the megafauna extinctions reminds us of our power and our cost. Wherever humans went, the world changed. We were not simply shaped by our environments, we shaped them in turn. The legacy of the first Americans. The people who entered the Americas were not only survivors but pioneers. They carried within them all the lessons of Africa, Arabia, Asia, and Europe. They brought fire, tools, memory, and imagination. They carried the knowledge of coastlines, rivers, and stars, and they wove these into new cultures, unique to the lands they entered. From the Arctic tundra to the Amazon rainforest, human societies took root. They built traditions, languages, and beliefs that echoed their landscapes. They carved petroglyphs, shaped tools from bone and obsidian, and learned to thrive in environments as diverse as any on Earth. The first footsteps into the Americas may have been hesitant, but soon they became a flood of life, filling a continent with human presence, reshaping its history forever. Reflections on the Great Leap. The crossing into the Americas was not inevitable. It was fragile, uncertain, balanced on ice and sea. It required courage to step into unlands, skill to survive in untested environments, and persistence to spread across a hemisphere. Yet humans did it, as they had done countless times before. By the time the Americas were fully peopled, humanity had achieved something astonishing. From a single origin in Africa, we had spread to every continent save Antarctica. We had crossed deserts, climbed mountains, braved forests, endured ice, and even sailed seas. No other species had achieved such a reach. And still, the story was not done. For with settlement came culture, with culture came innovation, and with innovation came civilizations. But the roots of all that lay here in these first migrations, in the courage of families who followed horizons into the unknown. The legacy of our wanderers, resilience, and innovation, from the first steps in Africa's savannas to the footprints pressed into New Mexico's sands, humanity's journey has been one of motion, not random wandering, but purposeful seeking. Across deserts, coasts, mountains, and seas, we carried with us not only our bodies, but our minds, our stories, and our ability to dream. Now, as we reflect on these vast migrations, we can see not just where we traveled, but who we became. The tapestry of humanity. Every migration left threads woven into the great tapestry of humankind. Africa gave us our genesis, the richness of genetic diversity, the spark of creativity that made us human. Arabia and Asia taught us adaptability, to bend without breaking in climates both harsh and fertile. Australia tested our daring, showing that even oceans could not hold us back. Europe drew from us art and spirit, the imagination to paint walls and carve meaning into stone. The Americas revealed our speed, resilience, and power to reshape the world itself. Today, when we look around us, at the faces of strangers in cities, at the variety of cultures across the globe, we see the legacy of these journeys. Skin tones, languages, traditions, and beliefs are not separate. They are echoes of those ancient paths, reminders that all of us share one origin, one story, resilience in the face of change. To migrate is to accept change. To walk away from a known place into uncertainty requires courage, patience, and resilience. Again and again, our ancestors faced shifting climates, vanishing resources, unknown animals, and unfamiliar lands. Each time they endured. Each time they adapted. Think of the family crossing Beringia, winds howling over ice, following mammoths into a silent expanse. Think of the voyagers in Southeast Asia, lashing logs together, daring to push into waves toward unseen land. Think of the bands on Europe's steppes, pressing forward against cold that pierced to the bone, carrying fire, carrying hope. This resilience is not gone. It lives in us still, in every challenge faced by humanity today, in every migration, every displacement, every adaptation to climate and technology. The ancient memory of resilience whispers within us. Ingenuity and innovation. Adaptation was never only physical. We reshaped the world with our minds as much as with our hands. Fire, sharpened stone, spears, shelters, clothing. Each step was innovation born from necessity. But from necessity came imagination. Tools became symbols. Symbols became art. Art became culture. The rock art of Australia, the cave paintings of Europe, the petroglyphs of the Americas. These were not simply decorations. They were maps of meaning, bridges between generations. In these images we see a truth, that even as humans spread apart across continents, we remained united by our creativity, our urge to tell stories, to remember, to dream. the shared fire of story. Imagine a fire burning in Africa 100,000 years ago. Around it, a small group sits, telling stories of animals, of journeys, of spirits unseen. Now imagine a fire in Australia, 60,000 years ago, where figures are painted on rock as people sing the dreaming into being. Picture a cave in Europe, flickering with light as horses and bison leap across walls in ochre and charcoal. And finally, picture a family in the Americas, gathered in a shelter of wood and hide, telling of hunts, of rivers, of ancestors. Different places, different times, but the same fire, the same impulse, to carry memory forward, to give shape to the unknown, to bind the present with the past and the future. Storytelling, perhaps more than tools, more than fire, was the true legacy of our wanderings. For through story we remained one people, even as we spread to the ends of the earth. The enduring drive to explore, what drove us to keep moving, what called us over mountains, into deserts, across seas. Some say necessity, the search for food, water, safety. Others say curiosity, the spark that compels us to ask, what lies beyond? Perhaps it was both, but whatever the cause, the effect is clear. Humanity became the species that would not stay still, the species that crossed every horizon, no matter how daunting. And that drive is not finished. Today we look not only across land and sea, but up, to space, to other planets, to other stars. The migrations of the past are mirrored in the explorations of the future. Mars may yet become our next Australia, the stars our next Americas. Unity and diversity. As we conclude this meditation on humanity's earliest migrations, one lesson becomes clear. Though we are scattered across nations, languages, and traditions, we remain one family. Every human alive today carries the imprint of those first journeys. Every genome is a record of paths walked, rivers crossed, lands settled. To remember this is to remember that division is an illusion. Beneath differences of culture and appearance, we are kin. The same fire burns in us, the same resilience, the same capacity to imagine and to dream. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture Africa 100,000 years ago. Picture a small band of humans standing at the edge of a savanna, looking outward. Before them lies a path they cannot see, a horizon they cannot measure. Yet they step forward. They step into deserts, forests, mountains, ice. They step across seas. They step into every land where humans now live. And you are their descendant. Their courage, their resilience, their imagination live in you. The journey they began is your inheritance. So as we reflect on these earliest migrations, let us carry forward not only the memory of where we came from, but the spirit of why we moved, to endure, to create, to explore, to dream. For humanity's story is not a tale of staying still. It is a tale of movement, of wandering, of seeking. And it is a tale still being written by us here now, and by those who will step into horizons we cannot yet imagine.